Hey everybody, this is Wild and Woolly Gaming coming to you live today because we have some pretty big news about what might be coming in game, and I think Gaijin has kind of tipped their hat. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, and without further ado, I'll get into it. So basically, I'll be going over what they just kind of announced that they've been considering for future improvements and additions to the game, and there are a lot. They're considering adding, as you can imagine, many new planes, tanks, even some naval and helicopters as well. And there's a big list, and there's also, in my opinion, some really exciting additions to the game, which I'll get into in just a few moments. So I'll start off with the aircraft. These are some things that you've probably seen in forums, or maybe you've wanted in the game. So I'll start off with the Hawker Harrier GR1. This is a VTOL aircraft developed by Hawker for the British Air Force, and it's a VTOL aircraft. This could potentially be the first VTOL system in the game, which would be very interesting. I don't know how they'd implement it, but it'd be very interesting, especially for realistic and arguably more so with simulator. You will also, well, potentially, we will also have the F-104S Starfighter, which is an American super fast, incredibly sleek dagger of a plane. I believe it's an interceptor. Maybe it's, if I'm not mistaken, potentially a fighter bomber as well. Incredible plane, which had many airspeed records and if I'm not mistaken, some time to altitude records as well for a very, very long period of time. The Dassault Mirage F1C, which is the interceptor version of the Dassault Mirage, which is a French fighter from the 50s, maybe the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. The F4E, which is an American fighter. We already have the F4C in the game. This is actually an improved version with a ground, or it's got more of an improved radar enhancement in it, which is very interesting in my opinion. The F4F Phantom II Ice, which is a German variant. The Lavochkin LA-176, which is, as you can imagine, a USSR plane. Mitsubishi F4EJ Phantom II for Japan, the F-104S Starfighter for Italy. So really, as I kind of suspected, once they took out the mouse tank and they replaced it with American tanks, is that what you'll be seeing is a lot of Americanization across every tech tree, and that seems to be happening here. And that kind of rounds out the most interesting additions for the fighter base. So, and notice here, there's no real pure bombers, and I think that's kind of how War Thunder is going. It's kind of sad to see. I want to see them introduce bombers into the game. It'll be interesting how they implement them. When I say bombers, I mean things like the B-52 or the Lancer, or even some less advanced aircraft. So it'll be interesting to see how they implement them, because there's not really been any real bomber enhancements in this game for a few patches, and it's somewhat disappointing. Albeit, you can do a lot with the Phantoms. It's just really not the same as being able to just completely wipe people out or have specified roles. Either way, let's get to the vehicles. One interesting addition that they might be adding is the M6E1, which is an American heavy tank. It was actually lightly produced. I believe there were a few dozen, models, or a few dozen actual examples of it that were made, and they were paraded around the U.S. even though they were prototypes, just to sell war bonds. So it was not something that was in production, but it was given a production designation, being the M6E1 rather than the like the T6E1 or something of that nature. The Panzer IV Aus GH mit Hydrostatischem. My apologies. It's a hydrostatic drive Panzer IV, and it's a different sort of Panzer IV. More likely, if they do add it into the game, because it has a unique hydrostatic drive, will be a premium. It looks very strange, kind of like an old 30s hot rod from the back. The PT-76E as well as the PT-57, both USSR tanks. The Type 93 SAM, just what we needed, more surface-to-air missile tanks or vehicles. That's a Japanese plane. The captured T-34 model 1941, which will, it almost has to be an Italian, not Italian, almost has to be a premium tank. That is an Italian tank. the French Tiger 1 Breton, which is if I'm not mistaken, that is either the monument tank that they have now that was abandoned by the side of a road, or it's in a museum. Either way, it's a famous tank that does still exist today, and it will be more likely than not a premium. I can't see how it would be anything else. And one other thing, and this is something I found very interesting, the SO-122 M4, this is something that they listed under the other nations designation. So that could be anything. Maybe it means that they're going to be adding it to many different nations. It was if I'm not mistaken, a Czech project, or it was an Eastern European country that tried to adapt an M4A3 Sherman with a 122 millimeter cannon for the artillery role. So it's a very interesting tank. And I think that would be a cool tank. I don't know if that'd be premium or not, but it would probably be a fairly high BR tank, at least for a Sherman. To get to the Navy, you have the Northampton class heavy cruiser for the U.S., the Project 83, which is a USSR naval vehicle, the HMS Exeter, and the IJN, forgive me if I mispronounce this, the Amatsukashi. For helos, you'll have the Boeing AH-6M, Little Bird, that's for the U.S. For the Soviets, you'll have the MIL, the MIL MIH, or 8AMTSH, which is a USSR. Again, well, really its first flight was during the Russian, after the USSR crumbled. And it's a very heavy ground attack, if I'm not mistaken, ground attack aircraft, helicopters. Really, really a heavily built aircraft, or helo. Technically still an aircraft. You'll have the Westland Gazelle for the British, and the Fuji UH-1B, which Hayadori, which is a Japanese variant of the UH-1 Little Bird, if I'm not mistaken, for the Americans. Further, there are some really interesting changes here that I could see that might actually happen. One of them is the Convoy Mode for Naval, and this is really cool because something that we have now in Naval is just kind of a basic Convoy Mode that's been around, if I'm not mistaken, since the inception of naval engagements. And this Convoy Mode, as suggested, and again, these are all suggestions. They're not necessarily going into the game and on one patch or another, or even between patches. But this Convoy Mode, as we have it now, is just you have a few destroyers and then maybe a few cargo ships, and you have to destroy the cargo ships. And that's it, and maybe you might have a light cruiser hidden in there for good measure. What they want to do, what was suggested at least, was that now for Convoy Mode, we'll have it such that we can have potentially enemy-controlled AI aircraft, or enemy AI-controlled aircraft. Potentially, there might be different formations, kind of like you would have in actual convoys crossing the Atlantic, where you'll have destroyers, I believe, flanking the more important ships so that they can provide submarine and aircraft defense, and so on and so forth. So I think that'd be really cool. For other miscellaneous features, hardpoint customization for helos and planes. And I mentioned this in a previous video, how hardpoint customization would revolutionize the game. And I really think it's still the way forward for this game. That would be a huge improvement over the pre-designated loadouts that they kind of give you, where it's like, oh, well, you can either have 4 1,000-pound bombs or, have an extra cannon or two, and it's not that, it's not that it wouldn't be that, it's not that what they have presently is not feasible and is not realistic. However, especially in more modern planes, there's a much larger diversity, one could say, in sort of bomb loads and hard points and things of that nature that you can have. So I think that they will do this game a lot of justice. And finally, the other large improvement that was suggested, and again, these are the major improvements that were just suggested, is the appearance of command vehicles to coordinate the battlefield for tanks. So we already have command vehicles in the game. They tend to be premium tanks, and if I'm not mistaken, more often than not, they are German, because Germany did prioritize command vehicles. However, they don't really have a purpose in the game outside of being premium vehicles, and maybe they have slightly different specifications like more armor or have maybe different shell types that they could use. But that's really it. Aside from maybe looking a little different and having slightly different specs, there's not really much different. This suggestion is it's been pressed forward and considered officially by Gaijin, so that maybe in more so probably realistic and simulator battles, you can have one tank that kind of coordinates and guides where other tanks should go, which would potentially open up the radio option for the game, radio modifications. If you've ever played World of Tanks like I used to, one of the big modifications and improvements for a tank was an advanced radio. That's something that's not in War Thunder and has not ever been in War Thunder. So maybe this advancement of having actual usable command vehicles outside of just the regular combat role, maybe that would force Gaijin to include radios and things like that into the next patch or next few patches. Either way, tell me what you guys think. This is a ton of new content, and it's something that a lot of people maybe haven't considered. I'm more excited for the features than the actual vehicles, but there are a few vehicles like the SO 122 M4, the French Tiger, as well as really the new F4 vehicles, and especially the F-104 Starfighter. Really excited about that. If that does ever get introduced, which I'm sure it will, it's really, at the end of the day, this game is kind of went into mission creep or vehicle creep as it is, and it's just kind of how it has to progress at this point. It's just how they implement it is really what will set this game apart from other competitors, and really what will define the future of this game. Because if they continue to just make BRs so compressed, then it makes, when you're taking an F-104 and you're facing it up against a MiG-15, that becomes an issue. Either way, let's see what happens. And they did do a bit of decompression in this past patch, so I am very grateful for that. But either way, again, this is Wild and Woolly Gaming. Tell me what you guys think. Leave a like. Remember, subscribe. Put a comment down there. What features do you guys want to see most? What features of the ones that I listed do you want to see most? And tell me some new ones. Maybe post them to Gaijin. I want to see this game get improved, as I'm sure all of you do. And this is the first step to doing it, is to tell Gaijin what you want, because that's how they pay attention. Again, this is Wild and Woolly Gaming, signing out for today. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, as I've already said twice before in the video. And see you guys in the sky. Take care, everybody, and I hope you have a great night, day, or whatever the heck you're doing. Take care.